Welcome, friend, to another journey together. We are so glad to have you here. Tonight, we will look at ancient secrets that hold the answer to letting go of pain and finding deep, lasting peace. If you would like, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. Let the stress of the day begin to melt away. Feel your breath getting soft and natural as you relax into this moment. There is nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to finish. This time belongs to you, to your healing, and to your peace. For hundreds of years, people have gathered under starry skies and in quiet temples to ask the biggest questions about human life. Why do we hurt? How can we find peace that lasts? What does it mean to truly let go? Tonight, these old lessons come to you whispered like a gentle song to calm both your mind and heart. The Buddha once said that life has suffering, but he also shared something full of hope. He said that suffering, no matter how deep, is not how we stay forever. It is not who we are. Like clouds passing through a big sky, our pain can move through us and past us, leaving behind the clear, peaceful feeling that has always been our true self. Imagine, if you will, a huge garden where every kind of flower grows. Some flowers are bright and sweet, filling the air with a nice smell. Others have thorns, some wilt quickly, and some struggle to grow in hard dirt. This garden is your life, and every experience, every feeling, every moment of happiness or sadness is part of its natural land. We often make the mistake of thinking that a good life should only have beautiful flowers. We chase after the roses and push away the thorns. We water only the things we like and ignore the rest. But the Buddha's first big idea was very simple and very accepting. All gardens have both beauty and hard parts. This is not a mistake in the design. This is the design itself. When he sat beneath the Bodhi tree 2,500 years ago, Prince Siddhartha was not trying to run away from life's challenges. He had already tried that. He was born rich and lived behind palace walls, where he had everything he needed and never saw anything uncomfortable. But even with all that pleasure and safety, something felt missing. A restless feeling lived in his heart. A feeling that there must be something more to life than just trying to be happy and avoiding pain over and over again. So he left the palace. He wandered for years, living very simply, trying the opposite way. If pleasure could not bring lasting peace, maybe having nothing could. He stopped eating until he was very thin. He meditated in very hot and very cold weather. He treated his body poorly, believing that suffering might be the way to wisdom. But this also failed to bring the peace he was looking for. It was only when he stopped running away from life and started running toward it. When he stopped trying to force understanding through extreme ways, that is when he truly understood. Sitting quietly under that old tree, not taking too much and not denying himself, neither grabbing nor pushing away, he simply watched. And in that space of pure watching, the truth showed itself. Life has suffering, yes, but we create extra suffering by fighting against this basic fact. We suffer when we lose something special, and then we suffer again by thinking we should not have to lose it. We feel pain when someone hurts us, and then we make that pain bigger by replaying the hurt over and over in our minds. We face the unknown future, and then we torture ourselves by demanding to know what we cannot know. This extra layer of suffering, the Buddha realized, is a choice. While we cannot always control what happens to us, we can learn to change how we react to what happens. We can stop fighting reality and learn to move with it, like a skilled dancer following the beat of the music instead of trying to force the music to match their steps. Think of a tree in a storm. The stiff tree that refuses to bend will snap and break, but the tree that moves with the wind, that allows the storm to move through its branches without fighting back, stays rooted and whole. This is the wisdom the Buddha found. Not how to avoid life's storms, but how to stay unbroken inside them. This understanding does not make us weak or give up. A tree that bends in the wind is not giving up. It is acting wisely to how things are, not how it wishes they were. In the same way, when we stop tiring ourselves out by fighting against reality, we find energy we never knew we had. Energy for kindness, for creativity, and for truly living life as it happens. Tonight, as you rest here listening to these words, you are practicing this very wisdom. Instead of fighting the tiredness in your body or the thoughts that come into your mind, you are simply allowing them to be there. You are making room for your experience without judging it, without needing to fix or change anything. This is where all healing begins. The first lesson of the Buddha is sometimes translated as life is suffering. But this translation misses the deeper meaning. The original word was dukkha, which means more like dissatisfaction, unease, or the sense that something is slightly off. It is the feeling you get when you are wearing a shoe with a small pebble inside. The pebble doesn't make walking impossible, but it creates a constant, small discomfort that affects your whole walk. Much of human suffering is like this pebble. It is not the big tragedies, though those certainly happen. It is the everyday friction of wanting things to be different than they are. The traffic that makes us late, the weather that doesn't match our plans, the people who don't act the way we think they should. The constant small tension of fighting back creates a background noise of unease that we often don't even notice until it stops. But here is what the Buddha discovered and what you can discover too. When we stop trying to shake the pebble out of our shoe and instead learn to walk with awareness, something amazing happens. Sometimes the pebble simply falls out on its own. Sometimes we find it is not actually a pebble at all, but simply a wrinkle in our sock that can be smoothed out with a gentle fix. And sometimes the pebble stays, but our awareness grows so big that we hardly notice it anymore. This is not about not caring or feeling nothing. It is about developing what the Buddha called wise understanding. Instead of immediately calling every uncomfortable feeling wrong or bad, we pause, we breathe, we watch with curiosity instead of judgment. What is actually happening right now? What am I adding to this experience through my thoughts and reactions? Think about the last time you felt frustrated. Maybe you were stuck in traffic or waiting in a long line. The situation outside was simply what it was, but your mind likely added a whole story. This always happens to me. I don't have time for this. This is ruining my day. Each thought was like adding another pebble to your shoe. The delay itself was just a fact, but the story your mind created around it became a source of extra suffering. The practice is not to get rid of these stories completely. That would be impossible and unnecessary. The practice is to notice them coming up and recognize them for what they are. Mental habits, automatic responses, old patterns of thinking that may have once helped but now often create more problems than they solve. When you notice yourself caught in one of these mental loops, you have a choice. You can continue feeding the story, making it bigger and more dramatic, or you can gently turn your attention to what is actually there. Your breath, the feeling of your body in this moment, the sounds around you, the simple fact of being alive and aware. This turning of attention is not hiding. You are not pushing the thoughts away or pretending they don't exist. You are simply choosing where to place your attention, like adjusting the focus on a camera. When you focus on the story your mind is telling, that story becomes bright and takes over everything. When you focus on what your senses feel right now, the story naturally fades into the background. This shift in focus is one of the most powerful tools for reducing suffering that has ever been found. It is available to you in any moment, in any situation. You don't need special equipment or perfect conditions. You don't need to wait until your life problems are solved or until you feel ready. You can practice it right now as you lie here listening to these words. Feel the weight of your body resting. Notice the rhythm of your breath. Let your attention settle into this moment without trying to make it anything other than what it is. If thoughts come up about tomorrow's chores or yesterday's regrets, that is perfectly natural. Simply notice them like clouds floating across the sky of your mind. and gently return your attention to the real feeling of breathing, of being, of resting. This is the base of all Buddhist practice, not getting rid of hard experiences, but building a different relationship with them, a relationship based on awareness rather than reacting, acceptance rather than fighting, presence rather than your mind traveling to the past or future. Let us now look at something even deeper. As you rest here in the gentle darkness, breathing softly, we turn to look at how much of our suffering comes not from life itself, but from the complicated web of expectations we build around life. There is an old story about a spider who spent her entire life spinning the most beautiful web. Each thread was perfectly placed, each connection exactly as she wanted. The web was her masterpiece, her identity, her safety. She polished it daily, fixed every tiny break, and protected it fiercely from any trouble. One morning, a strong wind came and tore the web apart. The spider was crushed. She had lost everything she thought she was, everything she thought she needed. She sat in sadness, surrounded by scattered silk, feeling completely broken. But as the sun rose and lit up the dewdrops still clinging to the broken pieces, something beautiful became visible. The scattered threads caught the light like tiny crystals, creating rainbows more lovely than anything the perfect web had ever shown. The spider realized that her holding on to the web's shape had blinded her to its deeper beauty. This story speaks to one of the Buddha's most deep ideas about the nature of suffering. Much of our pain comes not from what happens to us, but from our holding on to how we think things should be. We weave webs of expectation, identity, and control, and then suffer when life's inevitable winds mess up our carefully built patterns. Attachment in Buddhist understanding is not the same as love or care. You can love deeply without being attached. You can care deeply without clinging. Attachment is the sticky quality of mind that says, "This must always be this way," or "I cannot be happy unless this specific thing happens." It is the difference between holding something with an open hand versus gripping it with a closed fist. Think about a relationship you care about deeply. Love appreciates this person as they are, enjoys their presence, and wishes for their well-being. Attachment, however, adds conditions. It says, "I love you, but only if you continue to meet my needs in this specific way." It says, "I love you, but you must never change or leave or die." Love flows freely. Attachment creates contracts and expectations that no human being can fulfill forever. We become attached not only to people but to ideas about ourselves. I am successful. I am healthy. I am in control. I am safe. These identities feel solid and permanent. But life has a way of challenging every story we tell about who we are. The successful person faces failure. The healthy person becomes sick. The person who likes control meets chaos. The one who feels safe meets uncertainty. When these challenges come up, we have two choices. We can fight desperately to keep our cherished identities, creating huge stress and suffering in the process. Or we can recognize that these identities were always temporary things, like clouds in the sky or waves on the ocean. They come up, they exist for a while, and they naturally fade away. We are not made smaller by their passing. We are simply shown to be larger than any single identity could hold. This does not mean we should not have goals or preferences or dreams. The Buddha was not teaching that nothing matters or that we shouldn't care. He was pointing to the difference between flowing with life's changes and rigidly fighting them. A river has a destination, but it doesn't fight every rock or turn in its path. It finds a way around obstacles, sometimes carving new paths when necessary. It moves toward the ocean while remaining fluid, adaptable, and responsive to the land it meets. Think about how often we create suffering by fighting against change. We want our loved ones to stay exactly as they were when we first felt deeply connected to them. We want our bodies to stay young and strong forever. We want our jobs to provide steady safety and happiness. We want our communities and cultures to keep what we find valuable while changing what we think needs improvement. These desires are natural and understandable. But when they become strict demands rather than gentle preferences, they separate us from reality. Reality is constant change. Reality is uncertainty. Reality is the fact that everything we love will eventually change or pass away. This is not a punishment or a universal mistake. This is simply how life works. The practice of letting go does not require us to stop caring or to become emotionally numb. It asks us to care in a way that does not depend on things lasting forever, to love what is present while holding it lightly, to be fully involved with life while remembering that all forms are temporary. Imagine holding a beautiful butterfly in your cupped hands. You can appreciate its colors, its delicate shape, the miracle of its life. But if you close your hands to keep it forever, you will crush the very thing you love. The beauty of the butterfly includes its freedom to fly away. Your appreciation can be complete even though your time together is short. This is the kind of love the Buddha taught. Not the grasping love that demands things stay the same, but the spacious love that allows for change. Not the fearful love that tries to control what happens, but the trusting love that remains open to whatever unfolds. When we begin to practice this kind of letting go, something unexpected happens. Instead of losing what we love, we often find ourselves better able to truly enjoy it. When we are not constantly worried about loss, we can be fully present for what we have. When we are not trying to force people or situations to stay frozen in time, we can appreciate their natural growth and change. A mother who clings to her child's dependence may miss the joy of watching that child develop independence and confidence. A person who insists that their career defines their worth may never discover other sources of meaning and happiness. Someone who demands that their body never age or change may spend years fighting a battle that cannot be won, instead of finding new ways to appreciate and care for their physical form. The practice of non-attachment is not about caring less. It is about caring more skillfully. It is about loving in a way that supports growth and change, rather than demanding things stay the same. It is about finding safety, not in controlling outside conditions, but in developing an inner strength that can weather any storm. This inner strength is not something you create through effort or discipline. It is something you uncover by removing the layers of clinging and fighting that hide it. Like the sky that remains clear and open, whether clouds are there or not, your true nature is already whole and unshakable. The clouds of attachment may temporarily hide this truth, but they cannot fundamentally change it. As you rest here tonight, allow yourself to feel this openness. Notice how your breath flows in and out without your conscious control. Watch how thoughts come and go without you needing to manage them. Feel how your heart beats steadily, how your body knows how to rest and heal itself. This natural flowing and letting go is happening constantly inside you. You don't need to learn how to let go so much as you need to stop interfering with the letting go that is always happening. Your thoughts will change without your effort. Your feelings will shift like weather patterns. Your body will continue its process of renewal and release. The invitation is not to fight these natural rhythms, but to align yourself with them. To trust the wisdom that already knows how to let go, how to flow, how to find balance without your mind interfering. This trust does not happen overnight. For most of us, the habit of grabbing is strong. We have been taught that holding on is how we keep ourselves safe, how we keep what we value, how we control our destiny. Learning to let go feels risky, even dangerous. What if I lose everything that matters to me? What if letting go means giving up? But the Buddha's discovery, proven by countless students over thousands of years, is exactly the opposite. It is our grasping that causes us to lose touch with what truly matters. It is our attempts at control that create chaos. It is our fighting against change that stops us from adapting and doing well in new circumstances. When we learn to hold our preferences lightly, we often find that life organizes itself more peacefully than our worried minds could ever arrange. When we stop fighting against uncertainty, we discover supplies of wisdom and strength we never knew we had. When we release our tight grip on outcomes, we become ready for opportunities and connections that our narrow focus had stopped us from seeing. This is not magical thinking or wishful dreaming. This is the practical result of aligning ourselves with how life actually works, rather than how we think it should work. Like learning to swim by relaxing into the water's support rather than fighting against it. Learning to let go allows us to move through life with much less effort and much greater grace. The spider in our story eventually learned to appreciate the beauty that could only come out when her rigid patterns were gone. She discovered that her creativity was not limited to one perfect web, but could show itself in countless forms. She found that her safety came not from keeping any particular creation, but from trusting her ability to respond wisely to whatever conditions came up. You too have this ability for creative response. You too can learn to find safety in being flexible rather than being stiff. The winds of change that sometimes tear apart your carefully built plans are not your enemies. They are invitations to discover new forms of beauty, new sources of strength, new ways of being that you could never have imagined from inside your familiar patterns. This wisdom of letting go extends beyond our personal attachments to the very way we move through life itself. Let me share with you a story that lights up this truth. There once was a village beside a great river where the people had forgotten how to trust the current. Familiar patterns. There once was a village beside a great river where the people had forgotten how to trust the current. Their ancestors had known how to build boats that could move gracefully with the flow. But over generations, this knowledge was lost. Instead, the villagers spent their days building complicated dams and channels, trying to force the river to move according to their plans. They worked tirelessly day after day, fighting against the water's natural course. The more they struggled to control the river, the more messy it became. Floods destroyed their crops. Droughts left their water tanks empty. The harder they worked to force their will, the more the river seemed to fight their efforts. One day, an old woman who had been watching the struggle for years sat down by the riverbank and simply watched. She noticed how the water naturally flowed around rocks rather than trying to push them aside. She watched how it carved gentle curves through the land, finding the easiest path while still moving steadily toward its destination. She saw how the river was both persistent and soft, powerful and gentle. Inspired by this, the old woman built a simple boat and stepped into the current. Instead of fighting against the river's movement, she worked with it. When the water curved left, she allowed her boat to follow. When it picked up speed, she let herself be carried. When it slowed in deeper pools, she rested and appreciated the calm. To the villagers watching from the shore, it looked like magic. The old woman moved downstream with such ease and grace, covering more distance in an hour than their forced efforts had achieved in weeks. But it wasn't magic. It was simply the wisdom of cooperation instead of opposition, of partnership instead of trying to rule over it. This story reflects one of the Buddha's deepest ideas about suffering and the end of suffering. Much of our pain comes from our attempt to force life to match our preferences. We tire ourselves out trying to make the river of life flow uphill, trying to make temporary things permanent, trying to make other people think and feel and behave exactly as we wish they would. But what if there is another way? What if the same intelligence that guides the river, that turns seeds into flowers and organizes the dance of planets around stars, is also available to guide our lives? What if our job is not to control every outcome, but to learn how to move skillfully within the larger patterns of life? This doesn't mean becoming lazy or giving up all effort. The old woman in the story was not lazy. She still had to steer her boat, still had to read the water and respond to changing conditions, but her efforts were working with natural forces rather than against them. She worked with the river instead of against it. In your own life, you can begin to recognize the difference between flowing with life and fighting against it. When you are flowing, even difficult situations feel workable. Challenges become interesting problems to solve rather than personal attacks to defend against. You find yourself curious about how things will turn out rather than anxious about controlling outcomes. When you are fighting against life, everything feels harder than it needs to be. You spend enormous energy trying to force solutions that don't quite fit. You become frustrated when people don't respond to your efforts to change them. You feel like you are swimming upstream, making little progress despite great effort. The practice of giving in to life's flow doesn't mean giving up your values or leaving your goals behind. It means pursuing them in harmony with conditions as they actually exist, rather than as you wish they existed. It means being willing to adjust your methods when reality shows you that your current approach isn't working. Think of the last time you found yourself in a situation that felt completely out of your control. Maybe you were stuck in traffic during an important appointment, or waiting for medical test results, or watching a loved one make choices you believed would hurt them. In those moments, you probably felt firsthand the exhaustion that comes from trying to force the river to flow uphill. The practice of giving in to life's flow doesn't mean giving up your values or leaving your goals behind. It means pursuing them in harmony with conditions as they actually exist, rather than as you wish they existed. It means being willing to adjust your methods when reality shows you that your current approach isn't working. Consider a skilled sailor navigating the ocean. She has a destination in mind, but she doesn't try to sail directly into a headwind. Instead, she uses the wind's energy to move toward her goal, sometimes taking a zigzag path that seems longer, but actually gets her there with much less struggle. She reads the weather, adjusts her sails, and finds creative ways to work with natural forces rather than against them. This is the kind of wisdom that comes up when we stop fighting life and start dancing with it. We begin to recognize that obstacles are not necessarily enemies, but sometimes opportunities to discover new paths we would never have considered. Delays are not always frustrations, but sometimes perfect timing that allows other pieces to fall into place. Endings are not only losses, but also openings for new beginnings we could not have imagined while holding on to what was. Now let us turn our attention to something equally deep. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, we can find a perfect teacher about acceptance and surrender. Your lungs do not force the air in, nor do they grab it desperately. Once it arrives, they simply allow the natural rhythm of expanding and shrinking, receiving each breath as a gift and releasing it without holding back. This is the rhythm of all life when we stop interfering with it, receiving and releasing, opening and letting go. Like waves on the shore, like seasons cycling through the year, like the beating of your heart, life moves in natural patterns of holding and releasing. When we align ourselves with these patterns rather than fighting against them, life becomes not a series of problems to solve, but a dance to join in. But how do we learn this dance? How do we retrain minds that have been taught to grab and control and worry? The Buddha offered a path, and it begins with something so simple that we often miss its power. It begins with noticing what is actually happening right now, in this very moment, without immediately trying to change it. This practice is sometimes called mindfulness, but that word has become so common that we might miss its big meaning. True mindfulness is not just awareness. It is awareness without an agenda. It is the courage to watch your experience exactly as it is without immediately reaching for judgments or solutions or escapes. When you feel sadness coming up, mindfulness doesn't ask you to become happy. It asks you to become curious about sadness. What does it feel like in your body? Where do you notice it most strongly? How does it move and change as you watch it? When you stop treating sadness as a problem to fix and start experiencing it as a natural part of the human emotional range, something amazing happens. The sadness doesn't necessarily disappear, but your suffering about the sadness begins to melt away. This difference is key and often misunderstood. Pain and suffering are not the same thing. Pain is what happens when life gives us loss, disappointment, physical discomfort, or any of the countless challenges that are part of being human. Suffering is what we add to pain through our fighting back. Our stories about why this shouldn't be happening. Our desperate attempts to make the pain go away before it is ready to leave naturally. Imagine you are walking barefoot and you step on a thorn. The sharp feeling is pain, and it is completely natural and appropriate. Your nerves are doing their job, alerting you to potential harm. But then your mind might begin adding layers. I am so clumsy. I always do things like this. This is going to ruin my whole day. Why do bad things always happen to me? I can't stand this pain. Each of these thoughts creates extra suffering on top of the original physical feeling. The thorn hurts, yes, but the stories about the thorn often hurt more than the thorn itself. And unlike the thorn, which you can simply remove, the stories can continue causing pain long after the original accident has passed. You might find yourself telling others about your clumsiness, replaying the moment over and over, or becoming anxious about future walks. The Buddha's idea was that while we cannot always avoid the thorns of life, we can learn to pull them out cleanly without pushing them deeper through our mental reactions. We can feel the pain without creating suffering. We can experience loss without adding the torture of fighting it. We can face uncertainty without making it worse with anxiety about the uncertainty. This learning happens gradually, gently, like water slowly wearing smooth the rough edges of a stone. Each time you notice your mind creating stories about your experience and choose instead to return to the simple reality of what is actually present, you are practicing this ancient wisdom. Each time you feel an emotion without immediately trying to fix it or push it away, you are discovering your natural ability for acceptance. Let us explore this ability more deeply through another story. In a mountain village, there lived an old man who was known throughout the region for his unshakable peace. People would come from far and wide, looking for his secret. How did he stay so calm when others were anxious? How did he stay centered when life brought challenges? One day, a young woman approached him very upset. "Master," she said, "I have lost my job. My relationship is falling apart, and my health is failing. How can you sit there so peacefully when the world is full of such suffering?" The old man listened with complete attention, then pointed toward a nearby mountain stream. "Do you see how the water flows around the rocks?" he asked. "The rocks are solid, unmovable. The water is soft, yielding. Yet over time, which one shapes the other?" The woman looked at the stream, watching how the water carved graceful paths around every obstacle. "The water shapes the rocks," she said slowly. "Yes," the old man replied. "And which one fights against what it meets?" "The rocks stay rigid while the water flows around them," she realized. "Now tell me," the old man continued gently, "when troubles come to you, do you wish to be like the rock or like the water?" This teaching points to something deep about the nature of strength and resilience. We often think that being strong means being hard, unmovable, fighting against change. But the old man's wisdom suggests that true strength might be more like water, soft and yielding, yet capable of wearing away mountains. When we practice being like water in the face of life's challenges, we discover that being flexible is often more powerful than being stiff. A tree that bends in the storm is more likely to survive than one that stands stiff and breaks. A relationship that can adapt to change is more likely to last than one that insists everything remain exactly as it was. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting harmful situations without doing anything. Water is not weak. It carves canyons, moves continents, and finds its way through any barrier given enough time. But it does so through sticking with it and adapting rather than force and fighting back. In your own life, you can begin to experiment with this water-like approach to challenges. Instead of immediately pushing against what you don't like, pause and ask yourself, how might I flow around this obstacle? What would it look like to respond with flexibility rather than stiffness? How can I keep my main direction while adjusting my methods to current conditions? Sometimes this means taking a different route toward your goals. Sometimes it means adjusting your timeline. Sometimes it means discovering that what you thought was an obstacle was actually pointing you towards something better than what you originally had in mind. As we continue this gentle exploration, allow yourself to sink deeper into the comfort of your resting place. Feel how your body naturally knows how to be like water, softening into whatever surface holds you. Notice how your breath flows without effort, finding its own rhythm without your conscious management. These are examples of the water-like wisdom that already lives within you. There is another part of acceptance that the Buddha taught, and it may surprise you with its gentleness. True acceptance is not giving up or losing. It is not giving up on positive change or not caring about suffering. True acceptance is an act of love. It is the willingness to meet reality with an open heart rather than a closed fist. When you accept your sadness, you are not saying, "I want to be sad forever." You are saying, "I admit that sadness is here right now, and I am willing to be with it without immediately trying to make it go away." This creates space for the sadness to be felt, to be honored, and ultimately to change naturally. When you accept someone else's difficult behavior, you are not saying, "I approve of how they are acting." You are saying, "I recognize that this is how they are acting right now, and I am choosing to respond from clarity rather than reacting quickly." This creates space for wise action rather than a knee-jerk reaction. When you accept a challenging situation, you are not saying, "I like this situation." You are saying, "This is what is happening right now, and I am going to work with it as it is, rather than tiring myself out wishing it were different." This creates space for creative solutions that you might never discover while lost in fighting it. This kind of acceptance requires great courage, because it asks us to feel our feelings fully, to see situations clearly, and to respond honestly rather than automatically. It is much easier to numb ourselves or distract ourselves or fight against what we don't like. But the Buddha discovered, and countless students have proven, that the path through difficulties is always more graceful than the path around them. Fighting back creates tension in the body, unrest in the mind, and distance in relationships. Acceptance creates space for healing, clarity for wise action, and connection even in difficult moments. This doesn't mean we become doormats or that we stop working toward positive change. It means we learn to work from a place of peace rather than from a place of conflict. Let me offer you another way to understand this. Imagine you are in a dark room trying to find your way to the door. You could spend your energy cursing the darkness, demanding that someone turn on the light, or bumping frantically into furniture. Or you could accept the reality of the darkness and allow your eyes to adjust, moving slowly and carefully, feeling your way toward the exit. Both approaches acknowledge that you want to reach the door, but one approach creates extra struggle and suffering, while the other works wisely with conditions as they are. The darkness is not your enemy to fight. It is simply a condition to navigate wisely. In the same way, whatever difficulties you are facing in your life are not necessarily enemies to defeat. They may be conditions to navigate with wisdom, opportunities to develop new skills, or invitations to discover strength and compassion you didn't know you had. As we near the end of this portion of our journey together, let yourself feel the truth of these teachings, not just as ideas, but as lived experience. Right now, in this moment, you are practicing acceptance simply by allowing yourself to rest. You are not fighting against tiredness or trying to force alertness. You are flowing with your body's natural need for stillness and healing. This is a perfect example of how acceptance works. You are not being lazy or giving up. You are responding wisely to what your body and mind need right now. You are trusting the natural rhythms of activity and rest, engagement and withdrawal, learning and integration. In this trust, in this willingness to be exactly where you are without apology or fighting back, you are touching the very heart of Buddhist wisdom. You are discovering that peace is not something you have to earn or achieve or wait for. It is something you can recognize right here, right now, in this very moment of acceptance. Take a deep breath and let it out slowly. Feel the deep relief that comes when you stop fighting against what is and start flowing with it. This relief is always available to you in any moment, in any situation. It is as close as your next breath, as accessible as your willingness to soften rather than harden, to open rather than close, to trust rather than control. The path continues to unfold before us, but already you are walking it. Already you are discovering the freedom that lies not in getting everything you want, but in wanting what you have, not in controlling every outcome, but in trusting your ability to respond wisely to whatever comes, not in avoiding all pain, but in meeting it with such courage and compassion that it becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. As we journey deeper into this sanctuary of understanding, let us now explore one of the most life-changing discoveries we can make. In the quietness of your breathing, in the stillness of this moment, lies a deep truth about the nature of compassion and how it relates to our ability to let go of suffering. There is a tenderness that emerges when we stop fighting our experience and start embracing it with kindness. This tenderness is not weakness. It is the beginning of true strength. It is the recognition that our pain, our confusion, our very humanity deserves the same gentle attention we would offer to a beloved friend who was struggling. Often, when we think about letting go of suffering, we imagine it as a kind of spiritual achievement, something we must earn through perfect practice or flawless understanding. But the Buddha's approach was radically different. He taught that the path to freedom begins not with perfection, but with compassion, not with getting rid of our difficulties, but with changing how we relate to them. Listen to this old story. A woman came to the Buddha carrying her dead child, begging him to bring the baby back to life. The Buddha looked at her with infinite tenderness and said, "I will help you, but first you must bring me a mustard seed from a house that has never known grief." Desperate with hope, the woman ran from house to house throughout the village. At each door, she asked for a mustard seed from a family untouched by loss. But everywhere she went, she heard stories of sorrow. A father who had died young, a sister lost to illness, a grandparent who had passed peacefully, but was deeply missed. Every household had known the touch of grief. As the day wore on, something began to shift in the woman's heart. Her own pain didn't disappear, but it began to feel less lonely. She started to see that her suffering was not a punishment or a mistake, but part of the great human experience that connects us all. By evening, she returned to the Buddha, no longer carrying her child, but carrying instead a deep understanding. "Master," she said, "I could not find what you asked for, but I found something else. I found that I am not alone in my sorrow." The Buddha nodded gently. "Now you understand the first step on the path to healing. Suffering shared is suffering transformed." This story lights up something crucial about the nature of compassion and healing. When we try to carry our pain alone, believing that we alone have been picked out for difficulty, our suffering becomes much heavier than it needs to be. But when we recognize that pain is part of the shared human experience, that everyone we meet is carrying some form of struggle, our hearts begin to soften, not only toward ourselves, but toward all beings. This softening is the beginning of what Buddhists call loving kindness or metta. It is the practice of extending the same warmth and understanding to ourselves that we would naturally offer to someone we care about deeply. When a friend comes to you with a broken heart, you don't tell them to stop being sad. You don't judge them for their tears. You simply hold space for their pain with presence and care. The invitation now is to offer this same quality of presence to your own experience. Whatever you have been carrying, whatever has been causing you to suffer, can you meet it with the same gentleness you would offer to a dear friend? Can you admit that your pain makes sense, that it is a natural response to the challenges you have faced? Let us sit with this for a moment. Feel into any area of your life where you have been harsh with yourself, where you have been impatient with your own healing process, or critical of your own struggles. Now imagine that instead of yourself, a beloved friend was experiencing exactly what you have been going through. How would you speak to them? What words of comfort would you offer? What understanding would you extend? The words that come up naturally for your friend, these same words are available for you. The compassion that flows naturally toward others' pain can also flow toward your own. This is not being selfish or feeling sorry for yourself. This is the brave act of treating yourself as someone worthy of kindness. This shift in how we relate to our own suffering creates the foundation for real healing. When we stop adding the extra layer of self-judgment to our pain, the pain itself often begins to change. When we stop tiring ourselves out by fighting against our own experience, energy becomes available for real growth and change. Consider how differently you move through the world when you are at peace with yourself versus when you are at war with yourself. When you are constantly battling your own thoughts and feelings, much of your life force gets used up in internal conflict. But when you learn to hold your experience with kindness, that same energy becomes available for creativity, for connection, for the kind of wise action that comes from inner stillness rather than inner turmoil. Now let us explore how this compassionate approach extends beyond our relationship with ourselves to our relationships with others. One of the most challenging aspects of letting go of suffering involves releasing our need for other people to be different than they are. So much of our daily frustration comes from the gap between how we think people should behave and how they actually behave. Your partner should be more attentive. Your children should be more responsible. Your co-workers should be more considerate. Your family should be more understanding. The drivers on the road should be more careful. The politicians should be more honest. The list of how others should change in order for you to be at peace can become endless. But here is what the Buddha discovered through his own deep observation. Other people's behavior is like the weather. It has its own patterns and rhythms that are largely independent of your preferences. You can dress appropriately for the weather and take shelter when necessary, but you cannot control whether it rains or shines. This doesn't mean we become passive in relationships or that we stop having boundaries or preferences. It means we learn to respond to others from a place of knowing clearly what we can and cannot control. We can control our own actions, our own responses, our own level of kindness and wisdom. We cannot control other people's choices, reactions, or timing. When we truly understand this, a great weight lifts from our shoulders. We stop carrying the impossible responsibility of making everyone around us behave the way we think they should. We stop taking other people's moods and choices as personal attacks on our peace of mind. We begin to see that everyone, just like us, is doing their best with the level of awareness and skill they currently have. This perspective doesn't excuse harmful behavior or mean we should accept mistreatment, but it allows us to respond to difficulties in relationships from a place of understanding rather than reacting. When someone is harsh with you, instead of immediately taking it personally and responding with equal harshness, you might pause and recognize that their behavior probably has more to do with their own pain than with anything you have done. This recognition doesn't require you to absorb their pain or fix their problems. It simply allows you to respond with wisdom rather than wounds. You might choose to offer kindness if that feels appropriate, or you might choose to protect yourself by creating distance. But either response can come from a place of clarity rather than reacting. Let me share another story that shows this beautifully. A Zen master was walking down a busy street when a man running late for an important meeting accidentally bumped into him, knocking him to the ground. The man didn't stop to apologize or even acknowledge what had happened. He simply kept running. The master's students, who had seen the incident, were angry. "Master," they said, "that man was incredibly rude. He should have stopped to help you up and apologize." The master dusted himself off and smiled gently. "Why should he apologize to me for his own suffering?" he asked. "Could you not see how much pain he was in? How anxious and disconnected from the present moment? I feel compassion for him." This response shows the deep shift that happens when we begin to see others' difficult behavior as a reflection of their own inner struggle, rather than as a personal attack on us. The man who knocked down the master was indeed acting without thinking, but his lack of awareness was causing him to suffer much more than it was causing the master to suffer. When we understand this deeply, we discover that forgiveness is not something we do for others' sake. It is something we do for our own sake. Holding on to resentment is like gripping a hot coal with the plan of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending that harmful actions didn't happen or that they were acceptable. It means releasing the ongoing story of being a victim that keeps us tied to past hurts. It means choosing to respond to life from the present moment rather than from old wounds. This kind of forgiveness often happens gradually, layer by layer, like healing from a deep physical injury. You don't need to force it or make it happen according to any particular timeline. You simply need to be willing to soften whenever softening feels possible. To release whatever feels ready to be released. Sometimes forgiveness begins with forgiving yourself for having been hurt, for having trusted someone who wasn't trustworthy, for having been unaware or vulnerable. Sometimes it continues with forgiving the other person for being human, for making mistakes, for acting from their own fear or pain rather than from wisdom. And sometimes the deepest forgiveness is forgiving life itself for not being the safe, predictable, fair experience we thought it should be, for including loss and disappointment and uncertainty as certain parts of the human journey. As we continue to explore these teachings together, let yourself feel into any places where forgiveness might be ready to bloom in your heart. Not because you should forgive, but because forgiveness might be a gift you are ready to give to yourself. The gift of freedom from carrying old hurts. The gift of space for new experiences. The gift of approaching relationships from openness rather than being defensive. This process of compassionate release extends to more than just our relationships with people. It includes our relationship with our own past, with our mistakes and regrets, with the paths we didn't take, and the choices we wish we had made differently. So much of us carry a heavy backpack filled with old decisions we wish we could undo. If only I had chosen a different career. If only I had been braver in love. If only I had spent more time with my parents before they died. If only I had taken better care of my health when I was younger. The weight of these regrets can make each step forward feel more difficult than it needs to be. But consider this possibility. What if every choice you made, even the ones that caused pain, was somehow necessary for you to become who you are right now? What if your mistakes were not detours from your path, but essential parts of your path? What if the very experiences you most regret were also the experiences that developed your capacity for compassion, wisdom, and understanding? This doesn't mean that all choices are equally good, or that actions don't have consequences. It means that the path forward from any point is always more important than the path that led you to this point. You cannot change the past, but you can change your relationship to the past. You cannot undo your mistakes, but you can learn from them and use that learning to make wiser choices going forward. The Buddha taught that enlightenment is possible in any moment, regardless of your history. No matter what you have done or failed to do, no matter how long you have been stuck in patterns that cause suffering, this very moment contains the possibility of waking up. This very breath contains the opportunity to begin again. This is one of the most freeing truths in all of Buddhist teaching. You don't have to wait until you have perfected yourself to begin experiencing peace. You don't have to fix all your problems before you deserve compassion. You don't have to earn the right to let go of suffering. That right is yours simply because you are alive and aware in the gentle darkness surrounding you now, in the rhythm of your breathing, in the simple fact of your consciousness resting and receiving these words. Waking up is already present. Not as something you need to achieve, but as something you can recognize, not as something you need to become, but as something you already are beneath all the stories of struggle and feeling not good enough. Let this recognition settle into your bones. Let it soften any places where you have been holding tension against yourself or your life. Let it remind you that the peace you seek is not somewhere in the distant future, waiting for you to become worthy of it. It is here now, waiting for you to stop fighting against it. As we prepare to journey even deeper into these teachings, rest in this truth. You are already whole. You are already worthy of love and peace and freedom from suffering. The path we are walking together is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you have always been, beneath the layers of training and pain and misunderstanding. This remembering happens not through effort, but through release. Not through grasping, but through letting go. Not through becoming perfect, but through accepting yourself exactly as you are, right now in this moment, with complete tenderness and understanding. The journey continues, but you have already arrived at the most important destination. You have arrived at this moment of presence, this breath of peace, this recognition that you are infinitely more than any story of suffering you may have been carrying. In this recognition, healing has already begun. In this sacred space of rest and reflection, let us now turn toward one of the Buddha's most deep insights, a teaching so simple that children can understand it, yet so deep that it can change everything about how we experience life. It is the truth of impermanence, the recognition that everything that comes up will also pass away. Feel your breath for a moment. Notice how each inhale naturally gives way to an exhale. Notice how each exhale creates space for the next inhale. Your breathing does not try to hold on to any particular breath. It does not mourn the passing of the exhale or anxiously wait for the next inhale. It simply flows moment by moment in perfect rhythm with the nature of change itself. This is perhaps the most perfect teacher about impermanence that you carry with you always. Your breath knows something that your mind often forgets. It knows that holding on creates suffering and letting go creates flow. It knows that endings make room for beginnings and that fighting change is the source of much unnecessary pain. The Buddha spent years watching this truth in every part of life. He watched clouds form and disappear in the sky. He saw flowers bloom and wither. He witnessed the cycles of birth and death, youth and aging, meeting and parting that characterize all life. And in this watching, he discovered something remarkable. When we fight these natural cycles, we create suffering. When we align ourselves with them, we discover a peace that no outside circumstance can disturb. Let me share with you the story of a woman who learned this lesson in the most difficult way possible. She had spent years building what she thought was the perfect life. A loving marriage, 2 beautiful children, a career that fulfilled her, a home that felt like a sanctuary. She felt grateful for these blessings, but underneath her gratitude lived a constant small anxiety. What if something happened to this perfect life? What if change came and took away everything I cherished? And then change did come, not all at once, but gradually, the way change usually moves through our lives. Her children grew up and moved away. Her husband's interests grew in directions that no longer included her. Her body began showing signs of aging. Her career, once exciting, began to feel routine. The home that had once felt like a sanctuary began to feel empty and echoing. At first, she fought against these changes with everything she had. She tried to keep her children close by making them feel guilty about their independence. She attempted to force her marriage back into its earlier patterns through demands and accusations. She spent enormous amounts of energy and money trying to stop the natural aging process. She threw herself into work with desperate intensity, hoping to get back the excitement she once felt. But the harder she fought against the natural growth of her life, the more exhausted and bitter she became. Nothing she did could stop the flow of change. Her fighting back created extra suffering on top of the natural sadness that comes with life's changes. Finally, in a moment of complete exhaustion, she stopped fighting. She sat in her empty house and simply allowed herself to feel the full weight of her losses without trying to fix or change or deny anything. And in that moment of complete surrender, something unexpected happened. Instead of being destroyed by her sadness, she discovered that she was large enough to hold it. Instead of being made smaller by the changes in her life, she began to sense that she was something more basic than any of the roles or relationships or external circumstances that had shifted. She began to touch something that the Buddha called her true nature, the awareness that remains constant even as everything else changes. This awareness didn't get rid of her sadness about her losses, but it provided a space for the sadness that made it bearable, even meaningful. She realized that her ability to feel grief was actually a reflection of her ability to love. Her pain at letting go was proof of how deeply she had engaged with life. Her sorrow was not a mistake or a weakness, but a natural and even beautiful response to the preciousness of what she had experienced. As the months passed, something even more remarkable began to unfold, with her children living their own lives. She discovered interests in friendships she had never had time to develop while focused on mothering. With her marriage changing, she found parts of herself that had been sleeping for years. With her body changing, she developed a deeper appreciation for its years of faithful service and a more realistic understanding of what truly mattered for her well-being. The empty house that had once echoed with loneliness began to feel like a sanctuary of quiet, where she could finally hear her own thoughts and desires. The routine work that had felt stale became an opportunity to teach younger colleagues and find meaning in service rather than achievement. Even the signs of aging, which she had once fought so desperately, began to feel like markers of a life fully lived rather than a life being lost. This woman's journey illustrates one of the most surprising truths about human experience. The very changes we fight most strongly are often the changes that free us to discover new sources of happiness and meaning. The losses that feel like endings are frequently the beginnings of chapters we could never have imagined while holding on to what came before. But let us explore this more gently. You don't need to lose everything you love to understand impermanence. You can begin to practice with smaller changes, daily reminders that nothing stays exactly the same from one moment to the next. Notice how your thoughts are constantly changing. One moment you might be thinking about tomorrow's plans, the next moment remembering a conversation from last week, then wondering about what you'll have for breakfast. Your mind is like a river, always moving, always flowing. When you try to grasp a particular thought and hold it in place, it slips away like water through your fingers. Notice how your emotions are constantly shifting. Even strong feelings like anger or sadness or joy arise, reach a peak, and then naturally begin to fade. You don't have to make them go away. They leave on their own when their time is complete. Understanding this can bring tremendous relief when you are in the grip of a difficult emotion. "This too shall pass" is not just a comforting saying, it is a description of reality. Notice how your body is constantly changing. Every cell is in a process of renewal. Every breath brings in new air and releases what is no longer needed. Your heartbeat creates a rhythm of shrinking and expanding. Your body knows the wisdom of impermanence at the most basic level. Even your sense of identity is constantly evolving. The person you are today is different from the person you were 5 years ago, different from the person you were yesterday, different even from the person you were this morning. You grow, you learn, you adapt, you change your mind about things you once felt certain about. This is not a sign of instability or weakness. This is the natural intelligence of a living being responding to life. Now, let us explore how this understanding of impermanence can transform your relationship to difficulty. When you are going through a hard time, it is natural for that difficulty to feel permanent and overwhelming. Depression whispers that you will never feel joy again. Anxiety insists that danger is constant and inescapable. Grief suggests that the pain will never lessen. But these voices forget the truth of impermanence. Every emotional state, no matter how intense, is temporary. Every life circumstance no matter how challenging, is subject to change. This doesn't mean you should minimize your current experience or pretend that your pain isn't real. It means you can hold your pain within the larger knowledge that all things pass. This knowledge can provide tremendous comfort during difficult periods. When you are in the middle of a crisis, it can feel like the crisis is your entire reality. But remembering impermanence is like remembering that you are watching a movie. The scenes on the screen may be intense, dramatic, even frightening, but they are temporary. The movie will end and you will remain. The same principle applies to pleasant experiences. When life is going well, impermanence reminds us to appreciate what we have without clinging to it so tightly that we miss its beauty. When you know that this happy moment will not last forever, you can be fully present for it without the anxiety of trying to make it permanent. This is why the Buddha taught that attachment to pleasant experiences can be just as much a source of suffering as resistance to unpleasant ones. When we grasp desperately at happiness, trying to freeze it in time, we create tension even within joy. But when we can appreciate beauty, love, success, or any other positive experience while holding it lightly, we can enjoy it more fully, precisely because we are not constantly worried about losing it. Let us sit quietly for a moment with this truth right now. This very moment that you are experiencing as you rest here, listening to these words, this moment is unique and will never come again. The particular quality of light or darkness around you, the specific rhythm of your breathing, the exact thoughts and feelings coming up in your awareness. All of this is temporary and precious. Can you feel both the sadness and the beauty of this impermanence? Can you sense how the temporary nature of this moment makes it more precious rather than less? When we truly understand that nothing lasts forever, we begin to pay attention with the kind of presence that transforms ordinary moments into something special. This teaching extends to our relationship with our own lives and mortality. One of the deepest sources of human anxiety is the knowledge that this life, this body, this particular form of consciousness that we identify as ourselves is temporary. We know that someday we will die, and this knowledge can create a background fear that colors everything else. But the Buddha suggested a different way of understanding mortality. Instead of seeing death as the enemy of life, what if we could see it as life's teacher? What if the knowledge that our time here is limited could inspire us to live more fully, love more openly, waste less energy on small concerns? When we truly accept that our lives have an end, we often discover a clarity about what actually matters. The trivial worries that once consumed so much mental energy begin to seem less important. The relationships we have been taking for granted suddenly feel precious. The experiences we have been postponing until someday become urgent invitations to live. Now, many people who have faced serious illness or the death of loved ones report that these encounters with impermanence, while painful, also brought unexpected gifts. They found themselves appreciating simple pleasures they had previously overlooked. They discovered reserves of strength and wisdom they didn't know they possessed. They developed a deeper compassion for others who were suffering. They learned to say no to what didn't truly matter, and yes to what did. You don't have to wait for a crisis to access this clarity. You can begin right now to live with the awareness that this life is a temporary and precious gift. You can start treating each day as if it matters, each conversation as if it's important, each moment of beauty as if it's irreplaceable. This doesn't mean living with scary thoughts about death or rushing frantically through life trying to experience everything at once. It means living with presence, with gratitude, with the kind of attention that recognizes the amazing nature of ordinary existence. As we explore these teachings together, let yourself feel how they land in your body, how they connect with your own experience. You have already lived long enough to witness the truth of impermanence in countless ways. You have seen seasons change, relationships evolve, your own interests and abilities develop and shift. You have experienced the way intense emotions come and go, the way physical pain comes and goes, the way even your strongest beliefs and opinions can change over time. This direct experience is your greatest teacher. You don't need to take anyone else's word for the reality of impermanence. You can observe it for yourself, moment by moment, breath by breath. And in this observation, you can begin to find the peace that comes from flowing with life, rather than fighting against it. Let us now explore how this wisdom of impermanence can free you from one of the deepest sources of suffering: the belief that you are somehow fixed and unchangeable. Many of us carry painful stories about who we are. I'm someone who always struggles with anxiety. I'm not good at relationships. I'm the kind of person who never gets ahead. These identities feel solid and permanent, but they are actually another form of attachment that creates unnecessary suffering. The truth that the Buddha discovered is that you are not a fixed, unchanging thing. You are more like a flowing stream, always moving, always changing, always becoming. The anxious thoughts you had yesterday do not define who you are today. The mistakes you made in past relationships do not determine your capacity for love now. The struggles you have faced do not limit what you can become. This understanding can bring tremendous relief. When you realize that your current experience of suffering is not a permanent feature of who you are, space opens for healing and change. You are not sentenced to carry the same pain forever. You are not trapped by old patterns or past mistakes. The person who feels overwhelmed today is not the same person who will wake up tomorrow. Even if similar feelings come up, they are coming up in a slightly different you. A you that now has the experience of having survived today's challenges. Every moment offers the possibility of responding differently, of choosing a new direction, of letting go of what no longer serves you. When you make a mistake, you don't have to conclude that you are broken. When you feel afraid, you don't have to carry the identity of being a fearful person. When you experience sadness, you don't have to become someone who is always sad. All of these experiences are temporary visitors in the space of your awareness. They come up, they exist for a while, and they naturally pass away. This perspective doesn't mean that your choices don't matter or that you can't learn from your experiences. It means that you have much more freedom to heal and grow than you might have realized. You are not sentenced to repeat the same patterns of suffering forever. You are not defined by your most difficult moments or limited by your current struggles. Every breath offers the possibility of releasing what no longer serves you. Every moment is an invitation to respond with greater wisdom and compassion. Every day gives you the chance to let go of old stories that create pain and step into new ways of being that create peace. As these teachings settle into your understanding, allow yourself to rest in the openness they create. You don't have to figure everything out right now. You don't have to apply all of these lessons immediately. Simply let them plant seeds in the fertile ground of your mind, seeds that will grow and bloom in their own perfect timing. The truth of impermanence is both deep and practical. It can provide comfort during difficult times and deeper appreciation during pleasant times. It can free you from the tiring effort of trying to control what cannot be controlled and help you focus your energy on what actually can be influenced, your own responses and choices. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, in the natural cycles of rest and activity, in the constant flow of thoughts and feelings through your mind, you have a constant reminder of this truth. You are not separate from the great dance of change that moves through all existence. You are part of it, shaped by it, expressing it in your own unique way. This participation in the universal flow of change is not something to fear, but something to celebrate. It means you are fully alive, fully connected to the creative force that moves through everything. It means your life matters because it contributes to the ongoing growth of awareness and compassion in the world. Rest now in this understanding. Let it support you like water supports a swimmer, not by providing rigid structure, but by offering fluid support to your movements. You are held by something much larger than your personal concerns, something that knows how to navigate change with perfect wisdom, something that has been guiding the dance of existence since time began. As we continue deeper into this sacred space of rest and healing, let us gather all the gentle wisdom we have explored. and allow it to settle into the deepest parts of your heart. Like flower petals floating down to rest on still water, each teaching finds its perfect place in the lake of your mind. We have walked together through the garden of human experience, seeing both the roses and the thorns. We have learned to flow like water around the obstacles of life rather than fighting against them. We have discovered the deep relief that comes from accepting what is rather than tiring ourselves demanding what should be. We have touched the freeing truth of impermanence and felt how it frees us from the prison of trying to keep everything exactly as it is. Now, in this quiet hour, let us explore how all of these teachings weave together into a way of being that the Buddha called enlightenment. But do not think of enlightenment as some distant achievement reserved for special people. Think of it instead as the natural result of letting go of the habits that create suffering. Think of it as coming home to a peace that has always been waiting for you. There is an old teaching story about a person who spent years searching for a precious jewel that was said to bring perfect happiness to whoever had it. They traveled to distant lands, climbed dangerous mountains, talked with wise teachers, and studied countless books. They endured great hardships and sacrificed much in pursuit of this legendary treasure. Finally, tired and discouraged, they returned home empty-handed. As they sat in their own familiar room, feeling defeated and lost, their hand happened to brush against their chest. There, beneath their clothing, they felt the shape of something they had forgotten was there. It was the very jewel they had been looking for. It had been hanging around their neck on a simple cord all along, hidden beneath their travel clothes. In all their searching in outside places, they had never thought to look within. In all their complicated plans and long journeys, they had missed the simplest possibility. The treasure they sought had been with them from the very beginning. This story points to the heart of the Buddha's teaching. The peace you are seeking is not somewhere else, waiting for you to earn it or find it or create it. It is here now, in this very moment, closer to you than your own breath. It has been with you all along, sometimes hidden beneath layers of worry and striving and fighting back, but never gone. Every moment of suffering you have experienced has been like a heavy coat thrown over this inner jewel. The suffering was real. The pain was real. The challenges were real. But underneath it all, the jewel of your true nature remained untouched, whole, perfect, waiting for you to remember it was there. All the practices we have explored tonight, all the shifts in perspective we have considered, are simply ways of removing these heavy coats one by one. Mindfulness helps you step back from identifying with every thought and emotion. Acceptance teaches you to stop fighting against your experience. Compassion shows you how to treat yourself and others with kindness. Understanding impermanence frees you from the tiring effort of trying to control what cannot be controlled. Each of these teachings is like gently lifting away another layer that has been hiding your natural peace. And beneath all the layers, what do you find? Not something new that you have created, but something ancient that you have always been. Not something you have achieved, but something you can finally remember. Let me invite you now to feel for this deeper truth directly. Notice that right now in this moment, beneath whatever thoughts or worries might be present, there is a part of you that is simply aware, simply peaceful, simply here. This awareness doesn't struggle with your problems. It doesn't judge your pain. It simply watches everything with gentle presence. When you rest your attention in this watching awareness, rather than in the content of your thoughts and feelings, something remarkable happens. The suffering that seems so solid and overwhelming begins to feel less heavy, less permanent. You realize that you are larger than any single experience of pain or difficulty. This shift doesn't eliminate challenges from your life, but it changes your relationship to them completely. Instead of being trapped inside your suffering, you discover that you are the space in which suffering appears and disappears. Instead of believing that you are your pain, you recognize that you are the awareness that knows pain is present. This recognition is the key to letting go of suffering. not by pushing away difficult experiences, but by discovering that your essential nature is already free, already peaceful, already whole. The suffering happens in the world of thoughts and emotions, but you are the awareness in which these thoughts and emotions arise and pass away. All the practices we have explored, all the teachings we have shared point to this simple recognition. You are not broken and in need of fixing. You are not lost and in need of finding. You are not separated from peace and in need of achieving it. Beneath all the layers of training and pain and confusion, your true nature is already free from suffering. This recognition changes everything, even as nothing external needs to change. Your circumstances may remain the same, but your relationship to them changes completely. Problems become interesting puzzles to solve rather than threats to your well-being. Emotions become passing weather rather than defining traits. Other people's behavior becomes information about their internal state rather than personal attacks on your peace of mind. Let us explore what this might look like in the practical details of daily life. When you wake up tomorrow morning, instead of immediately jumping into the mental list of tasks and worries, you might take a moment to simply be aware that you are aware, to notice that consciousness has returned from the mystery of sleep and is now present once again to experience whatever the day brings. This simple recognition, this gentle remembering of what you are, can set a completely different tone for your entire day. Instead of approaching the day as a problem to solve or a challenge to survive, you might approach it as an opportunity to express your natural peace and compassion in whatever forms feel most real. When difficulties come up during your day, instead of immediately tightening into fighting back or reaching for ways to make the difficulty go away, you might pause and ask yourself, what would it look like to meet this situation from my deeper nature? How would I respond if I remembered that I am the awareness in which this problem appears, rather than a victim of the problem? This doesn't mean becoming passive or ignoring real issues that need attention. It means responding from a place of inner stability rather than reactive panic. It means bringing the fullness of your wisdom and compassion to bear on whatever needs your attention, rather than approaching challenges from a tired or defensive state. When other people trigger frustration or hurt in you, instead of immediately believing the story that they are the source of your suffering, you might remember that your peace comes from within. This allows you to respond to their behavior from clarity rather than hurt, to set boundaries from strength rather than defensiveness, to offer compassion even when they are acting without thinking. When old patterns of worry or criticizing yourself come up in your mind, instead of getting caught up in the content of these patterns, you might recognize them as old habits of thought that no longer serve you. Like clouds passing through the sky of your awareness, you can acknowledge them without being blown around by them. As we settle deeper into this understanding together, let me share with you one more story that beautifully shows the nature of letting go of suffering. There was once a monastery where the monks practiced meditation in a beautiful garden. In the center of this garden stood an old tree with branches so wide and leaves so thick that it provided perfect shade for quiet thinking. One autumn, a young monk became very upset as he watched the leaves beginning to turn color and fall from the beloved tree. He spent his meditation time worrying about the tree's apparent decline rather than focusing on his practice. He tried desperately to think of ways to prevent the leaves from falling to keep the tree exactly as it had been during the lush summer months. An older monk noticed his distress and sat down beside him. "What troubles you so deeply?" he asked with gentle concern. "The tree is dying," the young monk replied. "Look how the leaves are falling. Soon there will be nothing left but bare branches. This beautiful shade that has supported our practice will be gone." The older monk smiled softly and looked up at the tree with appreciation. "My friend," he said, "the tree is not dying. The tree is teaching. It is showing us the most important lesson of all. It is demonstrating how to let go with grace." The young monk looked puzzled, so the older monk continued. "The tree does not cling to its summer leaves. It does not fight the changing seasons or demand that autumn become summer again. It simply allows each phase of its existence to happen naturally, and because it lets go completely, it will have the energy to create new leaves in the spring, often more beautiful than the ones before. But what if the new leaves are not as beautiful? The young monk asked. What if next year the tree looks different? Then we will appreciate whatever beauty comes, the older monk replied. The tree's willingness to change is what keeps it alive and growing. If it tried to hold on to every leaf, if it fought every season, it would tire itself out and truly die. Its wisdom lies in its trust of the natural flow of life. The young monk sat quietly for a long time, watching the leaves fall with new eyes. Instead of seeing death and loss, he began to see trust and wisdom. Instead of witnessing destruction, he was watching a masterclass in the art of letting go. As winter came and the tree stood bare against the sky, the young monk discovered that its beauty had not lessened, but had simply taken a new form. The elegant shape of its branches, usually hidden by leaves, was now fully visible. Snow gathered on its arms like jewelry. Birds that had been hidden in its summer leaves were now clearly visible as they went about their winter activities. And when spring arrived, and new buds began to appear, the young monk felt a joy he had never experienced before. He realized that his holding on to the tree's summer form had actually stopped him from fully appreciating its winter beauty, and his fighting against change had blinded him to the miracle of renewal. This story offers a deep teaching about the nature of letting go of suffering. Often we suffer not because of what is happening, but because we are holding on to what was happening, or anxious about what might happen. We miss the beauty and wisdom available in the present moment because we are grieving the past, or fearing the future. The tree in the story represents the wisdom of your own deeper nature. Like the tree, you have the ability to let go of what no longer serves you without losing your essential self. Like the tree, you can trust the natural cycles of growth and rest, expansion and shrinking that move through all life. Like the tree, you can remain rooted in something deeper than surface appearances while allowing your external expression to change and evolve. When you align yourself with this tree-like wisdom, suffering begins to change. You may still feel sadness when you lose something precious, but the sadness feels clean rather than complicated. You may still feel fear when facing the unknown, but the fear doesn't spiral into panic because you trust your ability to respond wisely to whatever comes up. You may still feel anger when seeing unfairness or cruelty, but the anger becomes fuel for kind action, rather than poison that eats away at your peace. You may still feel loneliness when going through changes, but the loneliness doesn't convince you that you are completely alone because you remember your connection to all of life. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught about the end of suffering. Not the end of all difficult experiences, but the end of the additional suffering we create through fighting back, attachment, and the illusion of being separate. When these extra layers of suffering fall away like autumn leaves, what remains is your natural ability to meet life with presence, wisdom, and love. In this moment, as you rest here listening to these words, you have the opportunity to practice this letting go. Notice any places where you might be holding tension in your body and gently allow those muscles to soften. Notice any thoughts that are creating stress or worry in your mind and gently acknowledge them without feeding them more energy. Feel your breath flowing naturally in and out, showing moment by moment the art of receiving and releasing. Your lungs do not try to hold on to air that has already served its purpose. They do not anxiously grasp for the next breath before it is time. They simply participate in the rhythm of giving and receiving that keeps all life going. This is the rhythm you can align yourself with in every part of your life. Receiving each moment as a gift, fully experiencing whatever it holds, and then releasing it to make space for whatever wants to come next. This is how you let go of suffering without letting go of life. This is how you find peace without avoiding pain. This is how you discover that you are already everything you have been looking for. As these teachings continue to work their gentle magic in your mind, remember that you don't need to understand everything intellectually or apply everything perfectly. The wisdom of letting go is not a mental concept to grasp, but a natural ability to rediscover. Like a flower that knows how to bloom without instruction, you know how to let go without effort when you stop interfering with the process. Rest now in this knowing. Let your whole being soften into the truth that suffering is a choice, that peace is your birthright, and that love is your true nature. Let these words melt into the silence from which they came, leaving only the vast, gentle awareness that you are. In this awareness, there is no one who suffers and nothing to let go of. There is only the eternal now, forever fresh, forever whole, forever free. As we continue our gentle exploration of letting go of suffering, let us turn our attention to the most close and constant teacher you carry with you always, your breath. In this very moment, as you rest here in the quietness, your breath is offering you a masterclass in the art of release, the wisdom of surrender, and the natural rhythm of letting go. Notice how your body breathes without your conscious effort. You don't have to remember to breathe in or force yourself to breathe out. Your lungs expand and contract in perfect timing, receiving each breath as a gift and releasing it without holding back. This is perhaps the deepest teaching about letting go that exists, and it is happening within you right now, moment by moment, completely naturally. Your breath understands something that your worried mind often forgets. It knows that holding on creates tension and that releasing creates flow. It knows that forcing breaks the natural rhythm and that allowing creates harmony. Each time you breathe in, you are practicing the art of receiving life fully. Each time you breathe out, you are practicing the art of letting go completely. The Buddha often used the breath as the base for meditation practice, not because breathing is mysterious or magical, but because it perfectly shows the principles that lead to freedom from suffering. In your breath, you can watch impermanence happening moment by moment. Each breath is unique, coming fresh and passing away completely, never to be repeated exactly again. In your breath, you can practice acceptance. You don't judge the quality of each inhale or fight the necessity of each exhale. You simply allow the natural process to happen. In your breath, you can discover presence. When you pay attention to breathing, you are automatically brought into the here and now, because breath only happens in the present moment. Let us explore how this simple attention to breathing can become a path out of suffering. When you are caught in a spiral of anxious thoughts, when your mind is racing with worries about the future or regrets about the past, your breath offers you an anchor in the storm. It brings you back to the only moment where peace is actually possible. This moment, right now. Feel your breath for a moment without trying to change it. Simply notice the gentle growing as air flows in and the soft release as air flows out. Feel how your body knows exactly what to do without your mind interfering. This is your first lesson in trust, in allowing life to support you without your constant management and control. Now let us explore what happens when you begin to breathe with conscious awareness, not forcing or changing your breath, but simply bringing gentle attention to this natural process. As you do this, you may notice that your breathing automatically begins to slow down and deepen. This is not something you are making happen. This is your nervous system's natural response to mindful attention. This slowing and deepening of the breath signals to your entire being that it is safe to relax, safe to let go of the watchfulness and tension that suffering often creates. Your body begins to soften. Your mind begins to quiet. The tight knot of worry or pain that you may have been carrying starts to loosen naturally. But the breath teaches us about more than just relaxation. It teaches us about the rhythm of engagement and release that underlies all healthy living. Just as your lungs must empty before they can fill again, there are times in life when you must let go of what you are carrying before you can receive what wants to come next. Maybe you have been holding on to a relationship that has ended, carrying the weight of that loss like held breath. Your heart knows it needs to exhale this grief before it can inhale new love. Maybe you have been clinging to a job or situation that no longer serves you, afraid to release what is familiar, even though it is causing you pain. Your breath reminds you that letting go is not loss, but preparation for receiving something better, aligned with who you are becoming. The breath also teaches us about the difference between effort and effortlessness. When you try too hard to breathe, when you force or control your breathing, it becomes hard and uncomfortable. But when you simply allow breathing to happen naturally while maintaining gentle awareness, it becomes a source of peace and energy. This principle applies to every aspect of letting go of suffering. When you try to force yourself to stop feeling sad or angry or afraid, when you use willpower to push away difficult emotions, you create the same kind of hard discomfort that forced breathing creates. But when you allow emotions to move through you naturally while maintaining gentle awareness, they begin to flow like breath, coming and going away without getting stuck. Let me share with you a story that shows this beautifully. There was once a woman who suffered from terrible anxiety. Her mind would race with worst-case scenarios about everything from her health to her relationships to her work. She tried many different approaches to control her anxiety. She made lists of all the things that might go wrong and planned how to prevent them. She avoided situations that triggered her worry. She used positive words to try to think her way out of fear, but nothing seemed to work for very long. The anxiety would always return, often stronger than before. Finally, desperate, she sought help from a meditation teacher who gave her a surprisingly simple instruction. When anxiety comes up, don't try to get rid of it. Instead, breathe with it. At first, this advice seemed backward. Breathe with the anxiety. Wouldn't that make it worse? But the teacher explained that anxiety, like all emotions, needs space to move and change. When we fight against it or try to push it away, we actually trap it in our bodies and minds. But when we breathe with it, we give it room to flow. The woman began practicing this approach. The next time she felt anxiety rising, instead of immediately reaching for her usual ways of control and avoidance, she simply placed her hand on her chest and began to breathe consciously. She imagined breathing space into the tight, worried feeling in her body. She imagined breathing compassion toward the part of herself that was afraid. At first, the anxiety didn't disappear, but something remarkable happened. She noticed that she could feel anxious without being consumed by anxiety. She could have worried thoughts without believing that she was in immediate danger. The anxiety was still present, but it was present within a larger space of awareness and breath. Over time, as she continued this practice, she began to notice that anxiety would come up in her body and mind, reach a peak for a few moments, and then naturally go down just like waves on the ocean. She learned to surf these waves of feeling rather than being knocked over by them. She discovered that she was much stronger and more resilient than she had believed. This woman's experience illustrates a deep truth about the relationship between breath and suffering. When we breathe with our difficulties, rather than holding our breath against them, we discover that we are larger than any single emotion or situation. We learn that we can be present with discomfort without being destroyed by it. Your breath can teach you this same lesson. The next time you notice suffering coming up in your mind or body, try this gentle experiment. Instead of immediately trying to fix or escape or analyze the difficulty, simply breathe with it. Place your hand on your heart, if that feels comforting. Imagine that you are breathing space around the suffering, not to make it go away, but to give it room to be present without overwhelming you. As you breathe in, you might silently say to yourself, "I acknowledge this suffering." As you breathe out, you might whisper, "I offer it space and compassion." You are not trying to solve anything or change anything. You are simply practicing the brave act of being present with your experience while staying connected to the wisdom of your breath. This practice works because it aligns you with the natural rhythm of life rather than against it. Instead of creating extra suffering through fighting back and struggle, you are learning to flow with whatever is coming up. You are discovering that you don't need to be afraid of your own emotions, thoughts, or feelings. You can meet them all with the same steady, rhythmic presence that your breath shows every moment. As we continue to explore this together, Let yourself sink deeper into the comfort of conscious breathing. Feel how each exhale is a small act of letting go, a tiny practice of release. Feel how each inhale is a gentle statement of your willingness to receive whatever this moment offers. There is another part to this teaching that the Buddha emphasized. He observed that when we pay close attention to our breathing, we begin to notice the small pause between the inhale and the exhale, and another pause between the exhale and the next inhale. In these tiny spaces of stillness, we can catch a glimpse of something profound, the peace that exists between all experiences. These pauses in the breath are like windows into your true nature, the part of you that is always at rest even when life around you is busy. When you learn to find these spaces of stillness within your breathing, you begin to discover that this same stillness is available in every moment, even in the middle of difficulty. The suffering mind tells us that peace is only possible when all our problems are solved, when all our pain has disappeared, when everything in our life is exactly as we want it to be. But the breath teaches us something different. It shows us that peace is available right now in this moment, in the space between thoughts, in the pause between worries, in the stillness that exists at the center of all activity. Let us practice finding this stillness together. As you breathe naturally, begin to notice the gentle pause at the end of each exhale. Just before the next inhale begins, don't try to make this pause longer or control it. Simply notice it with gentle curiosity. In this tiny space of stillness, there is no problem to solve, no future to worry about, no past to regret. There is simply peaceful awareness. Similarly, notice the soft pause at the end of each inhale, just before the exhale begins. Again, don't control this pause. Simply rest your attention there for a moment. Feel how in this space you are neither taking in nor letting go. You are simply being, simply present, simply at peace. These moments of stillness between the breaths are training you to find the peace that exists between all experiences. Between the coming of a worried thought and your reaction to it, there is space. Between hearing difficult news and becoming upset about it, there is a pause. Between feeling an emotion and identifying yourself as that emotion, there is stillness. Learning to recognize and rest in these spaces is one of the most practical skills for letting go of suffering. When you can find the pause between something happening and your reaction, you have the opportunity to choose your response rather than being driven by old patterns. When you can rest in the stillness between thoughts, you remember that you are more than any single thought or worry. This doesn't require perfect meditation or years of practice. It simply requires the willingness to pay attention to what is already happening naturally within you. Your breath is always available as a teacher, always demonstrating the rhythm of receiving and releasing, always showing you how to be present with whatever comes up without getting lost in it. As you continue to rest here, breathing naturally and peacefully, let yourself feel the deep wisdom that your body already has. Let yourself trust the intelligence that knows how to breathe without your management, how to heal without your worry, how to find balance without your constant adjustment. In this trust, suffering begins to lose its grip. Not because problems disappear, but because you remember that you are connected to something larger than any single problem. You remember that you are part of the same intelligence that moves the breath, that beats the heart, that grows flowers from seeds and heals cuts without conscious direction. This remembering is itself a form of letting go. You release the tiring burden of trying to control everything and allow yourself to be supported by the same wisdom that has been breathing you since the moment you were born. In this support, in this trust, in this willingness to let your breath teach you how to live, you discover a peace that no outside circumstance can disturb. Your breath continues its patient teaching moment by moment, showing you that letting go is not something you do, but something you allow. It is not an achievement, but a relaxation. It is not a distant goal, but a present reality as close as your next exhale. as available as your willingness to soften and receive the gifts that each moment brings. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, in the quiet sanctuary of this moment, let us now explore one of the most life-changing teachings the Buddha offered about suffering. It is the understanding that our most difficult emotions and challenging mental patterns are not enemies to be defeated, but guests to be received with wisdom and compassion. This may seem strange at first. When anger comes up, when sadness overwhelms, when fear grips your heart, the natural impulse is to push these feelings away, to distract yourself from them, or to judge yourself harshly for having them. But the Buddha discovered something remarkable. The very act of fighting against our difficult emotions often creates more suffering than the emotions themselves. Imagine for a moment that your mind is like a guest house and emotions are visitors who come to stay for a while. Some guests are pleasant and welcome. Joy arrives with flowers and laughter. Gratitude comes bearing gifts of appreciation. Love enters with warm hugs and kind words. These guests we invite in gladly and often wish would stay longer. But other guests arrive uninvited and unwelcome. Anger stomps in with heavy boots, tracking mud across our peaceful floors. Sadness enters quietly, but fills every room with grey shadows. Fear comes with urgent warnings and demands for immediate attention. Shame sneaks in the back door, whispering cruel stories about our worth. Our first instinct with these difficult guests is often to slam the door, to refuse them entry, to pretend they are not knocking. But here is what the Buddha understood. When we refuse to acknowledge these visitors, they don't simply go away. They tend to knock louder, to find other ways in, to cause more disturbance than if we had simply opened the door and greeted them with presence. The practice of letting go of suffering involves learning to be a polite host to all of your inner guests, even the ones you didn't invite. This doesn't mean you have to like them or encourage them to stay longer than necessary. It means you stop tiring yourself out fighting against their presence and instead learn to meet them with awareness and compassion. Let me share with you the story of a man who learned this lesson through years of struggling with depression. For most of his adult life, whenever he felt the dark weight of sadness coming down, he would immediately spring into action. He would force himself to think positive thoughts, throw himself into busy activities, or turn to substances and distractions to avoid feeling the pain. But despite all his efforts to keep depression away, it would always return, often feeling heavier and more persistent than before. He began to see himself as fundamentally broken, someone who would never be free from this returning darkness. The struggle against his depression was exhausting him more than the depression itself. One day during a particularly difficult period, he was too tired to fight anymore. He simply sat with the sadness, too depleted to resist or distract himself. And in that moment of complete surrender, something unexpected happened. He noticed that the depression, while painful, wasn't actually dangerous. It was just an experience moving through him like weather moving through the sky. As he continued to sit with the feeling rather than fighting against it, he began to sense its feel, its rhythm, its message. He realized that his depression often came up when he had been pushing himself too hard, neglecting his need for rest and thinking. The sadness was actually trying to tell him something important about his life, something he had been too busy to hear. Over time, he learned to greet his depression differently. When he felt it coming, instead of panicking or immediately reaching for distractions, he would make space for it. He would say both to himself and to the feeling, "I see you. I understand you are here. What do you need me to know?" This shift from fighting back to listening changed everything. The depression still visited from time to time, but it no longer felt like a life sentence. It became more like a teacher arriving to remind him when he was out of balance, when he needed to slow down, when he had been disconnected from his deeper values and needs. This man's experience illustrates a deep truth about emotional suffering. Often, our pain contains important information, and when we refuse to listen to it, it has to speak louder to get our attention. But when we learn to listen with presence and compassion, Even our most difficult emotions can become sources of wisdom and healing. Now let us explore how you can begin to practice this welcoming approach with your own difficult guests. The next time you notice a challenging emotion coming up, perhaps anxiety about an upcoming event or frustration with a situation you cannot control, try this gentle experiment. Instead of immediately trying to make the feeling go away, pause and take a conscious breath. Place your hand on your heart if that feels helpful. Then speak silently to the emotion as if it were a guest at your door. I notice you are here, anxiety. I may not like having you as a visitor, but I am willing to acknowledge your presence. What do you want me to know? Then listen, not with your thinking mind trying to solve or fix, but with your heart, with the same gentle attention you might offer to a friend who was in pain. What is this emotion trying to tell you? What need or concern is it pointing toward? What wisdom might it carry, even wrapped in discomfort? You might discover that your anxiety is actually love in disguise, worried about someone or something you care about deeply. You might find that your anger is passion for justice that hasn't yet found a good way to be expressed. You might realize that your sadness is grief for something precious that you have lost, and that this grief is actually honoring the depth of your ability to love. This practice of listening to difficult emotions, rather than immediately trying to escape them, is not the same as getting stuck in them or feeding them dramatic stories. It is about meeting your inner experience with the same compassion you would offer to a dear friend who was struggling. When a friend comes to you with a broken heart, you don't tell them to stop feeling sad. You don't minimize their pain or rush them through their grief. You offer presence, understanding, and space for their feelings to be felt and expressed. The invitation now is to offer this same quality of presence to your own inner experience. As you practice this approach, you may begin to notice something remarkable. When difficult emotions are met with presence rather than fighting back, they often begin to shift and change naturally, like clouds that gather, rain, and then break apart. Emotions that are allowed to be felt fully often solve more quickly than emotions that are fought against or pushed down. This doesn't mean that all emotional pain disappears immediately when you stop fighting it. Some grief needs time to be processed. Some anger needs to be felt and understood before it can be released. Some fear needs to be acknowledged before courage can arise. But when you stop adding the extra layer of suffering that comes from fighting your feelings, the original emotion can do its work and move through you more easily. Let us explore this more deeply through another story. There was once a woman who carried a deep well of anger about unfairness she had witnessed and experienced in her life. This anger felt dangerous to her, so she spent enormous energy trying to keep it hidden. She was always pleasant, always helpful, always trying to keep the peace, even when her boundaries were being crossed. But the more she pushed down her anger, the more it leaked out in other ways. She became critical and judgmental toward others. She developed physical symptoms like headaches and stomach problems. She felt disconnected from her own power and energy. The effort of keeping her anger locked away was tiring her out. Finally, she decided to try a different approach. In the safety of her own home, during quiet meditation time, she allowed herself to feel the anger fully. She didn't act on it or express it toward others. She simply let herself experience the feeling of anger in her body, the heat and energy and intensity of it. As she continued this practice over time, something beautiful began to unfold. She discovered that underneath her anger was a fierce love for justice and truth. She realized that her anger was actually a healthy response to unhealthy situations. It was her inner wisdom trying to tell her that something was wrong and needed to be addressed. Armed with this understanding, she began to find wise ways to express her anger. She learned to set clear boundaries with people who were taking advantage of her kindness. She found ways to direct her passion for justice into meaningful work and helping others. Her anger became fuel for positive change rather than a force of destruction. This change was only possible because she stopped treating her anger as an enemy and started listening to it as a messenger. She learned to separate the emotion itself from the actions she might take in response to it. She could feel angry without being cruel. She could acknowledge unfairness without becoming bitter. She could access her power without causing harm. This principle applies to all difficult emotions. Sadness can become a doorway to compassion. Fear can become a doorway to wisdom. Loneliness can open our hearts to connection. Frustration can fuel creative problem solving. But only when we stop running from these feelings and start listening to what they have to teach us. As we continue this exploration together, let yourself feel into any emotions that might be present right now. Perhaps there is a small anxiety about tomorrow's chores. Maybe there is a lingering sadness about something that didn't go as hoped. There might be frustration with yourself for not being further along in your healing or growth. Whatever feelings are present, even if they are just quiet background feelings, try meeting them with this new approach. Instead of judging them as wrong or trying to make them disappear, breathe with them. Acknowledge them as part of your current human experience. Thank them for whatever information they might be carrying. You might say silently, "Thank you, worry, for showing me how much I care about doing well tomorrow." Or, "Thank you, sadness, for honoring the importance of what I hoped for." Or, "Thank you, frustration, for pointing me toward my desire to grow and heal." This practice of gratitude toward difficult emotions may feel strange at first, but it is based on a profound recognition. These feelings arise because you care about your life, because you have values and hopes and loves that matter to you. Even painful emotions are often expressions of something beautiful in you. Your capacity to love, to hope, to care deeply about your experience and the experience of others. When you begin to see difficult emotions this way, they lose some of their power to overwhelm you. You realize that feeling angry doesn't make you an angry person. Experiencing fear doesn't make you a coward. Having sad thoughts doesn't mean you are a sad person. These are simply experiences moving through the vast space of your awareness. Now, let us explore how this understanding can help you work with repeating thought patterns that create suffering. Many of us have familiar mental loops that our minds return to again and again. Maybe it is worry about health or money. Perhaps it is replaying old conversations or imagining future scenarios that may never happen. These thought patterns can feel like prisons trapping us in cycles of mental suffering. But here too, the practice of welcoming rather than fighting can be life-changing. When you notice your mind starting down a familiar path of worry or overthinking, instead of immediately trying to stop the thoughts, try greeting them like old friends. "Oh, hello, worry about money. I see you are visiting again. I know you think you are helping me by rehearsing all the things that could go wrong." Then, instead of getting caught up in the content of the worried thoughts, you can step back and observe the pattern itself with gentle curiosity. What triggers these thoughts? What need are they trying to meet? Are they genuinely helping you prepare for something, or are they just spinning in circles without purpose? Often repeating thought patterns are like old records that got stuck. They keep playing the same song over and over, not because the song is particularly helpful, but because that is where the needle got stuck. When you approach these patterns with awareness rather than fighting back, you can sometimes gently lift the needle and allow new music to play. This might sound something like, "I notice my mind is playing the 'What if something terrible happens' song again. This is just what minds do sometimes. I don't have to join in the singing. I can let this song play in the background while I bring my attention to what is actually happening right now." Sometimes you might discover that beneath repeating worry is a real concern that needs attention. Maybe your anxiety about money is pointing toward a need to create a budget or have an important conversation. Maybe your overthinking about a relationship is highlighting something that needs to be addressed or accepted. When repeating thoughts carry useful information, you can thank them and take appropriate action. When they are just spinning without purpose, you can acknowledge them with compassion and gently redirect your attention to the present moment. The key is learning to respond to your mental patterns from a place of choice rather than habit. You begin to see that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that notices thoughts coming and going. From this perspective, even the most challenging mental patterns become workable. As these teachings settle into your understanding, allow yourself to feel the relief that comes with this new approach. You don't have to be at war with your own mind and emotions. You don't have to achieve perfect mental and emotional states to deserve peace and happiness. You can learn to dance with all of your inner guests, the welcome and unwelcome alike. This dancing with difficulty is actually a deep form of self-love. It is the recognition that all aspects of your humanity deserve compassion, even the parts that feel uncomfortable or unwanted. When you can embrace your full emotional and mental experience with presence and kindness, you discover a freedom that no outside circumstance can take away. In the gentle darkness surrounding you now, in the rhythm of your natural breathing, let yourself rest in this understanding. You are large enough to hold whatever emotions visit you. You are wise enough to learn from whatever thoughts come up. You are compassionate enough to meet all of your inner guests with presence and care. This presence, this willingness to be with what is, rather than fighting against it, is the base of all healing. It is the ground from which true change grows. Not the forceful change that tries to remove parts of yourself, but the natural change that naturally occurs when all aspects of your being feel seen, heard, and accepted. Rest now in this acceptance. Let it support you like warm water supports a tired body. You are exactly where you need to be in your journey of learning to let go of suffering. Every difficult emotion you have experienced has been teaching you something about the depth of your capacity to feel and care. Every challenging thought pattern has been showing you something about how much you want to live well. Trust this process. Trust your ability to learn and grow and heal. Trust that you already have everything you need to work skillfully with whatever comes up in your inner world. The peace you seek is not found by getting rid of all difficult guests, but by learning to be a wise and compassionate host to the full range of human experience. As we draw together all the threads of wisdom we have explored in this gentle journey, let us turn toward the most practical and deep question of all. How do we live this understanding of letting go in the middle of our daily lives? How do we carry the peace we have touched here into our relationships, our work, our challenges, and our ordinary moments? The path of letting go of suffering is not something we walk only in quiet meditation or peaceful moments of reflection. It is a way of being that can transform every interaction, every decision, every response to the countless situations that make up a human life. It is an art that deepens with practice, becoming more natural and graceful the more we trust its wisdom. Let us begin with perhaps the most challenging area for practicing release, our relationships with other people. So much of our daily suffering comes from our expectations of how others should behave, our need to control how we are seen, and our fighting against the natural rhythms of connection and separation that characterize all human bonds. Think about the last time someone disappointed you. Perhaps a friend cancelled plans at the last minute, or a family member responded to your kindness with criticism, or a colleague took credit for work you had done. In these moments, the mind immediately creates a story. This shouldn't have happened. They should have been more considerate. They don't value me enough. This proves that people can't be trusted. But what if you could meet these situations with the same wisdom your breath shows? What if instead of holding on to the disappointment like held breath, you could allow it to move through you naturally? Acknowledging the hurt without letting it define the entire relationship or your worth as a person. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting mistreatment. It means responding from clarity rather than reacting. When someone behaves in a way that hurts or disappoints you, you can acknowledge your feelings, set appropriate boundaries, and make wise choices about how to proceed, all without carrying the poison of resentment or the burden of trying to change who they are. There is a deep freedom in releasing others from the impossible task of meeting all your needs and expectations. When you stop demanding that your partner never be moody, that your children always make choices you approve of, that your friends always be available when you need them, You free yourself from the constant disappointment that comes with these impossible demands. More importantly, you free yourself to appreciate people as they actually are. Rather than constantly measuring them against how you think they should be, you begin to see their humanity, their struggles, their own journey of learning and growth. You can love them for their unique mix of strengths and limitations, rather than loving only a perfect version that exists only in your mind. Let me share with you the story of a woman who learned this lesson through a difficult relationship with her aging mother. For years, she had hoped that her mother would finally become the warm, emotionally open parent she had always longed for. She tried countless approaches to create the closeness she wanted, bringing thoughtful gifts, sharing personal stories, planning special outings. But her mother remained who she had always been: practical, quiet, uncomfortable with emotional closeness. Each interaction left the daughter feeling rejected and frustrated. She would replay conversations, analyzing what she had said wrong, planning different approaches for next time. The relationship became a source of constant suffering for both of them. Finally, after years of this painful pattern, the daughter decided to try a different approach. Instead of going into each visit, hoping to change her mother or create a different dynamic, she began practicing acceptance of who her mother actually was. She stopped taking her mother's emotional distance personally and started seeing it as her mother's own form of protection developed through her own life experiences. This shift changed everything. When her mother offered practical help instead of emotional warmth, the daughter learned to receive this as her mother's way of showing love. When conversations remained on safe, surface topics, she stopped trying to force deeper sharing and instead appreciated the peace of these gentle exchanges. Most remarkably, when the daughter stopped pushing for the relationship to be different, space opened for appreciation of what it actually was. She began to see her mother's quiet strength, her reliability, her own form of caring that showed itself through actions rather than words. The relationship became a source of peace rather than suffering. Not because her mother changed, but because the daughter learned to love what was instead of grieving what was not. This same principle of loving acceptance can transform every relationship in your life. When you release people from the burden of being different than they are, you create space for real connection. When you stop trying to fix or change others, you free up enormous energy for your own growth and happiness. But perhaps even more challenging than releasing control over others is learning to release control over your own life circumstances. So much suffering comes from our resistance to situations we cannot change, illnesses we didn't choose, losses we couldn't prevent, changes we didn't start. The practice of letting go involves learning to tell the difference between what you can influence and what you must learn to accept. This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up on positive change. It means directing your energy wisely, focusing on the areas where your efforts can actually make a difference while releasing the struggle in areas beyond your control. You can work to improve your health while accepting that aging and illness are part of the human experience. You can nurture your relationships while accepting that all connections eventually change or end. You can pursue meaningful work while accepting that outside success cannot guarantee lasting happiness. The wisdom tradition speaks of this as learning to be like water, persistent in moving toward your goals, but fluid in adapting to obstacles and changes in the land. Water doesn't stop flowing when it meets a rock, it finds a way around, sometimes carving a new path, sometimes taking a completely different path, but always keeping its essential nature while responding wisely to conditions. Let us explore what this kind of fluid persistence might look like in your own life. Perhaps you have been struggling with a health condition that limits your activities. Instead of tiring yourself out fighting against these limits, or being bitter about how your life has changed, you might ask, given these current conditions, how can I live most fully? What new forms of meaning and joy are available to me that I might not have discovered if my life had remained the same? Or perhaps you are facing money challenges that have forced you to simplify your lifestyle. Rather than dwelling on what you have had to give up, you might explore, what has this situation taught me about what truly matters? What strengths have I developed through learning to live with less? How might this experience deepen my compassion for others facing similar struggles? This approach doesn't deny the real difficulties of challenging circumstances. It simply adds another layer of possibility, the opportunity to discover that you are larger and stronger than you may have realized, that meaning and peace are available even in the middle of unwanted change. The practice of letting go also extends to your relationship with time itself. So much modern suffering comes from our fighting against the natural rhythms of life, wanting to speed up healing processes, trying to force relationships to develop more quickly, becoming impatient with the slow nature of personal growth. But wisdom traditions have always understood that everything has its own timing. Seeds planted in spring don't produce fruit immediately, no matter how much we might want them to. Grief doesn't go away according to our preferred schedule. Trust develops slowly in relationships. Deep changes in personality and view often take years to happen fully. When you align yourself with the natural timing of life rather than fighting against it, a different kind of peace becomes possible. You can plant seeds of positive change and then allow them to grow at their own pace. You can do your part in healing relationships while accepting that some repairs take time and patience from all people involved. This doesn't mean becoming passive or losing your sense of purpose. It means holding your goals and intentions lightly, working steadily toward them, while remaining open to the possibility that they may happen differently than you expect or on a different timeline than you prefer. One of the deepest areas for practicing release is in your relationship with your own past. Many people carry enormous suffering in the form of regret about decisions they made or didn't make, relationships they hurt or lost, opportunities they missed or mishandled. This backward-looking suffering can consume tremendous energy that could otherwise be available for creating positive change in the present. The practice of letting go involves learning to make peace with your own history, not by pretending that mistakes didn't happen or that you wouldn't choose differently if you could, but by recognizing that the past is beyond your power to change. The only moment where you have any real influence is this moment right now. This means forgiving yourself for your human mistakes, for the times you acted from fear instead of love, for the decisions you made with incomplete information or limited wisdom. It means recognizing that every choice you made was the best you could do given your level of awareness and skill at that time. This self-forgiveness is not a one-time event, but an ongoing practice. Each time you notice your mind returning to old regrets, you can gently redirect your attention to the present moment and ask, what can I learn from this memory that might help me choose more wisely now? How can I use this experience to develop greater compassion for myself and others who are also imperfect and learning? Sometimes this process includes making things right where possible and appropriate. But even when fixing it directly isn't possible, you can honor your past mistakes by living more consciously in the present, by treating others with greater kindness, by making choices that align with your deepest values. As we explore these teachings together, let yourself feel how they might apply to the specific challenges and relationships in your own life. Where are you holding on too tightly? What would it feel like to loosen your grip just a little? Where are you fighting against reality in ways that create unnecessary suffering? How might you practice flowing around obstacles instead of trying to force them out of your way? The beautiful truth about the practice of letting go is that it becomes easier with experience. Each time you choose acceptance over fighting back. Each time you respond to difficulty with presence rather than reacting. Each time you meet your own mistakes with compassion rather than criticism, you strengthen your capacity for peace. Like learning to swim or ride a bicycle, the movements that once felt awkward and uncertain gradually become natural and graceful. You begin to trust your ability to handle whatever life brings. You develop confidence in your resilience, your wisdom, your capacity to find meaning and beauty, even in challenging circumstances. This doesn't mean that life becomes problem-free or that you never feel difficult emotions. It means that you develop a different relationship to both problems and emotions. They become temporary weather patterns in the sky of your awareness rather than permanent definitions of your reality. Let us rest for a moment in the recognition of how far you have already come in this understanding. Simply by listening to these teachings, by opening your heart to new ways of being, by questioning old patterns that no longer serve you, you are already practicing the art of letting go. You are already showing the courage and wisdom that this path requires. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, in the quiet space of this moment, you can feel the truth of what you have learned. You are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your circumstances. You are the awareness in which all of these come and go. You are the space in which life unfolds, the consciousness that watches all experiences without being defined by any single one. This recognition is not a philosophical idea, but a lived reality that you can return to in any moment. When life feels overwhelming, when relationships become difficult, when circumstances challenge your peace, you can remember, I am the sky, and all of this is just weather passing through. From this perspective, letting go of suffering is not something you do, but something you remember. You remember that your essential nature is already free, already peaceful, already whole. You remember that you don't need to earn peace by solving all your problems or getting rid of all difficult emotions. Peace is what you are when you stop struggling against what is. As these teachings continue to deepen in your understanding, trust the natural process of learning. Some ideas will click immediately and begin changing your experience right away. Others will plant seeds that will bloom in their own perfect timing. Some lessons will need to be learned over and over until they become as natural as breathing. This is the way of all profound learning. Be patient with yourself. Be gentle with your human tendency to forget and remember. To understand intellectually before feeling it emotionally, to progress gradually rather than all at once. The path of letting go of suffering is not a destination to reach, but a way of walking through life with greater ease and grace. In relationships, you can practice seeing others clearly without the filter of your expectations and demands. In challenging circumstances, you can practice responding from wisdom rather than reacting from fear. In your daily activities, you can practice presence rather than rushing toward the next moment. In your quiet times, you can practice gratitude for what is rather than longing for what is not. Each of these small practices contributes to the larger change that occurs when you align yourself with the natural flow of life rather than fighting against it. You begin to move through your days with less effort and more grace. You find yourself arguing less with reality and appreciating more of what each moment offers. This is the fruit of the practice. Not a life without challenges, but a life lived with wisdom. Not the removal of all difficult emotions, but the capacity to meet them with presence and compassion. Not control over all circumstances, but the ability to respond skillfully to whatever comes up. As you rest here now, breathing naturally and peacefully, let yourself receive these teachings as gifts for your ongoing journey. Let them settle into your heart like seeds planted in rich soil. Trust that they will grow and bloom in their own perfect timing, supporting you in countless moments yet to come. You have everything you need to practice the art of letting go of suffering. You have the breath that teaches you about natural rhythm and release. You have the awareness that can watch all experiences without being overwhelmed by them. You have the heart that knows how to meet life with compassion and courage. Most importantly, you have this moment right now where peace is always available, where love is always present, where the possibility of freedom from suffering is as close as your willingness to soften, to open, to let go of the struggle and rest in what is. In this letting go, you discover that you haven't lost anything essential. You have simply remembered who you have always been. Beneath all the stories of struggle and separation, the journey continues moment by moment, breath by breath, choice by choice. And in each moment, the invitation remains the same. To release what binds you and embrace what frees you. To let go of suffering and discover the peace that has been waiting patiently for your return. And so, dear friend, as our time together draws to a gentle close, let these final words wrap around you like the softest blanket, carrying you into the deepest rest. In this sacred space we have shared, you have touched something ancient and forever, something that will continue to unfold in your life, long after these words fade into silence. Through these gentle hours, you have walked a path that countless beings have traveled before you. You have breathed with the Buddha's wisdom, felt the compassion of ages past, and discovered that the peace you seek has been with you all along. This is not knowledge that can be lost or taken away. It has become part of you now, woven into the very fabric of your understanding. You have learned that suffering, while painful, is not your enemy, but your teacher. You have discovered that the very act of fighting against your experience often creates more pain than the experience itself. You have touched the profound truth that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your circumstances, but the vast, gentle awareness in which all of these come and go like clouds in an endless sky. In the rhythm of your breath, you have found a constant companion, always available to guide you back to the present moment. When your mind wanders into stories of past regret or future worry, your breath knows the wisdom of receiving and releasing, of holding nothing too tightly, of flowing with life rather than against it. This teacher travels with you always. As close as your next inhale, as reliable as your next exhale. You have learned to welcome even your most difficult emotions as guests in the guest house of your heart. No longer do you need to waste precious energy fighting against anger, sadness, fear, or loneliness. Instead, you can greet them with presence. Listen to their messages and allow them to move through you naturally like weather patterns in the sky of your being. You have discovered that acceptance is not defeat, but wisdom. That letting go is not loss, but freedom. That giving up control is not weakness, but the greatest strength. Aligning you with the natural flow of life that knows how to heal, how to grow, how to find balance without your constant interference. In your relationships, you now carry the understanding that others like you are walking their own path of learning and waking up. You can love them without demanding that they be different, support them without trying to fix them, and set boundaries without closing your heart. This wisdom transforms every interaction into an opportunity for compassion, rather than a test of your peace. You have seen how impermanence, rather than being a source of fear, can become a source of deep comfort. Everything that causes you pain will pass. Every difficult circumstance will change. Every overwhelming emotion will naturally go down. And in this knowing, you find the courage to feel fully without being consumed, to engage completely without being attached. Most beautifully, you have recognized that beneath all the stories of struggle and feeling not good enough, beneath all the layers of training and pain, your true nature remains untouched and whole, like a jewel hidden beneath gathered dust. Your essential peace has been waiting patiently for you to remember it was there. This remembering is not an achievement, but a homecoming, not a destination, but a recognition of where you have always been. As you carry these teachings into your waking life, remember that the path of letting go of suffering is not about perfection. It is about practice, about returning again and again to presence, to compassion, to the willingness to meet life as it is, rather than as you think it should be. Each time you choose awareness over reacting, each time you respond to difficulty with kindness rather than fighting back, you are walking this ancient path with courage and grace. There will be days when you forget everything you have learned here, when old patterns come back, when suffering feels solid and permanent once again. This forgetting is not failure, but part of the natural rhythm of learning. Like waves on the shore, understanding comes and goes, each return bringing you a little deeper into wisdom, a little closer to lasting peace. Be patient with yourself as you would be patient with a dear friend who is learning something new and challenging. Celebrate the small victories, the moments when you catch yourself before reacting, the times when you choose compassion over judgment, the breath when you remember that you are the sky and not the clouds. Know that every step you take on this path of freedom benefits not only you, but all beings. Your peace contributes to the peace of the world. Your willingness to heal your own suffering makes space for others to heal theirs. Your courage to face difficulty with presence and compassion inspires the same courage in others, often in ways you may never see, but that ripple outward like gentle waves in an infinite ocean. As sleep begins to claim you, now let your body sink completely into rest. Feel how your muscles know how to soften without your direction, how your breath knows how to slow and deepen naturally, how your mind knows how to release the day's concerns and drift into the healing silence of dreams. In this letting go into sleep, you practice the ultimate release. You give up control of your consciousness, trusting the natural intelligence of your being to restore and renew you. You demonstrate your faith in the rhythms of rest and activity, of expansion and shrinking, of holding and releasing that rule all of life. Rest now in this knowing. Let the wisdom you have received settle into the deepest places of your being, where it will continue its gentle work of change even as you sleep. Trust that when you wake, you will carry with you not just the memory of these teachings, but their living presence, their active power to transform suffering into peace, resistance into flow, separation into love. In this release, in this trust, in this gentle surrender to the rhythms of rest and renewal, may you find the deepest peace. May your dreams be filled with the light of understanding. May you wake refreshed and renewed, carrying the gifts of this journey into all the moments yet to come. Rest now, release now, let go now into the infinite hug of peace that has been waiting for you all along. You are home. Thank you for joining us here. Sleep well.